November 8th, 1942, Yo 4:15 a.m., Richmond Shipyard No. 2, California. The air tastes like ozone and wet iron. It sticks to the back of your throat. A metallic tang that never quite leaves, no matter how much coffee you drink. Down in way No. 1, the darkness is torn apart by 1,000 violent stars. The flash of arc welders creates a strobe light effect, illuminating the rain that's been hammering the San Francisco Bay for 3 days straight. In those flashes, you see them, an army in coveralls and leather aprons, swarming over the skeletal ribs of a massive steel beast. It is cold. A bone, deep, damp cold that stiffens fingers and makes the steel slippery. But nobody stops. Nobody slows down. Because 3,000 miles away, in the freezing black water of the North Atlantic, the clock isn't just ticking, it's bleeding. Standing on the gantry, looking down into the chaotic pit of sparks and mud, is Liz Greeley. She isn't holding a rivet gun tonight. She's holding a stopwatch. Her eyes are red-rimmed, stinging from the smoke. She watches a crane lower a bulkhead into place. It sways in the wind. A foreman screams a correction. The metal groans, then slams into position with a sound like a gunshot. Liz checks the watch. Too slow. She whispers. The words are lost under the roar of a pneumatic hammer, but the sentiment hangs heavy in the air. To understand why Liz Greeley is standing in the rain at 4 in the morning, obsessing over seconds, you have to understand the math of 1942. It is a terrifying equation. German U-boats, the Wolfpacks, are sinking Allied merchant ships faster than the United States can build them. In early 1941, it took American shipyards an average of 230 days to build a single Liberty ship. Nearly 8 months. In that same 8-month span, a single German U-boat commander could send 10 times that tonnage to the bottom of the ocean. The Allies are losing the logistics war. England is starving. The Soviet front is gasping for supplies. The Pacific Fleet is stretched thin. If the supply line snaps, the war is over. The solution was the EC-2S C-1 cargo transport, the Liberty ship. They call them ugly ducklings. President Roosevelt himself called them dreadful-looking objects. And he's right. They aren't sleek destroyers or majestic carriers. They are welded bathtubs. 441 feet of flat steel plates, designed to haul 10,000 tons of tanks, crates, and ammunition. They are expendable. They are simple. And right now, they are the only thing keeping the free world alive. But 230 days is a death sentence. Liz Greeley wipes the rain from her safety goggles and looks back at the blueprint, clamped to the railing. It's sodden and curling at the edges. She isn't a military strategist. She's a mechanic, an engineer with a mind that sees patterns where others see chaos. Most of the men in the yard see a ship as a building, something you construct from the ground up, brick by brick, or, in this case, plate by plate. You lay the keel, you build the ribs, you weld the skin, you add the deck. It's linear, it's traditional, and it's archaic. Liz watches a crew of 4 men struggling to maneuver a heavy ventilation cowl into the hull. They're slipping in the mud, fighting gravity, trying to weld in a cramped, dark corner of the ship's interior. It takes them 40 minutes. Why are we welding that inside the hull? Liz mutters, her mind racing. Why didn't we weld it to the deck section before the crane lifted it? This is the friction point. The bottleneck. The shipyard is treating the Liberty ship like a custom-built home when it needs to be treated like a Ford Model T. The loudspeaker crackles, announcing a shift change. A siren wails, a mournful sound that echoes off the water. The graveyard shift begins to stream toward the gates, replaced instantly by the day shift. The noise never stops. The welding arcs never dim. The yard is a living organism that eats steel and breathes smoke. Liz doesn't leave. She heads down the metal stairs, her boots clanging on the grate, heading toward the production office. Inside, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of stale coffee. Henry, Kaiser's production managers are gathered around a large table covered in maps and schedules. They look exhausted. The pressure from Washington is crushing. The Navy wants more tonnage. The President wants more tonnage. We're cutting it down to 40 days. Liz, one of the floor managers says, rubbing his temples. That's a miracle compared to last year. We can't push the crews harder. Safety is already a nightmare. Liz walks to the table. She places her wet hand on the schedule. 40 days isn't enough, she says. Her voice is quiet, but it cuts through the room. The Germans sank 6 ships yesterday. 40 days is a lifetime. It takes time for the concrete to cure, Liz. It takes time to align the propeller shaft. The manager argues, gesturing to the complex diagrams. Physics is physics. We're doing it wrong, she says flatly. We're building the ship in the Slipway. We're waiting for one piece to finish before we start the next. We have thousands of men standing around waiting for a welder to finish a seam so they can install a pipe. She grabs a pencil and draws a circle around the slipway, the spot where the ship is actually assembled. This, she points to the slipway, is a parking lot. It's dead space. We shouldn't be building the ship here. We should be assembling it here. The room goes silent. The distinction is subtle, but to an engineer, it's seismic. Pre-fabrication, she continues, the adrenaline taking over. We don't build the deckhouse on the ship. We build the deckhouse on the ground, 10 miles away if we have to. We install the plumbing, the wiring, the mirrors, the damn captain's bunk. We do it all on the ground, where the men can move, where there's light, where they aren't tripping over cables. And then, the manager asks, skeptical. And then we pick the whole room up, Liz says, mimicking a crane with her hand, and we drop it onto the hull. Click. Done. You're talking about sections weighing 50, 60 tons, another engineer points out. The cranes can't handle that precision. You swing a 60-ton block of steel in this wind, you'll kill half the crew. Then we reorganize the cranes. Liz counters. We create a bullet. We time the lifts to the second. We don't just speed up the work, we delete the work. We turn the shipyard into a conveyor belt. She looks at the men. They are tired. They are skeptical. But they are also desperate. Clay Bedford wants a stunt, Liz says, referring to the general manager of the shipyards. He wants to show the Navy what we can really do. He wants to launch a ship in record time. Not 40 days. Not 30. She pauses, letting the number form in her mind. It sounds insane even to her. 4 days, she says. A laugh barks out from the back of the room. 4 days. It takes 4 days just to align the engine. Not if the engine is already aligned in a sub. Assembly before it touches the keel. Liz shoots back. I've mapped it out. But it requires total synchronization. Every bolt, every plate, every pipe needs to be ready before the keel is even laid. We don't build. We assemble. The manager stares at her. The audacity of the idea is terrifying. If they fail, they waste millions of dollars of steel and humiliate the company in front of the War Department. But if they succeed... Sunday. The manager says, looking at the calendar. Sunday, November 8th. That's today. We lay the keel for the Robert E. Peary at midnight. He looks up at Liz. You think your system can get her wet by Thursday? Liz swallows. Her heart is hammering against her ribs like a rivet gun. She thinks of the boys in the North Atlantic. She thinks of the freezing water. Give me the cruise, she says. And get out of my way. The manager nods slowly. All right, Greeley, you've got the floor. God help us all. Outside, the rain intensifies, drumming against the corrugated tin roof. The Robert E. Peary is currently nothing more than a stack of steel plates sitting in the mud. Liz steps back out into the storm. She looks at the empty slipway, way number 12. In less than 100 hours, that empty space needs to contain a fully operational 7,000-ton cargo ship. She checks her stopwatch again. The countdown hasn't just started. It's already running out. November 8th, 1942, 12:01 a.m. Richmond Shipyard, way number 12. The rain hasn't stopped. If anything, it's harder now, turning the slipway into a glistening, black mirror. Thousands of workers line the scaffolding. They aren't cheering. They're holding their breath. In the center of the slipway, a massive crane engine whines, straining against the dark. Suspended in the air is the first section of the keel. 60 tons of flat, cold steel. Liz Greeley stands by the control box, phone pressed to her ear, watching the cable tension. Drop it, she commands. The steel descends. It doesn't inch down, it falls with controlled violence. It hits the wooden blocks of the slipway with a thud that vibrates through the soles of every boot in the yard. Boom. A dozen welders lunge forward before the echo even fades. Sparks erupt instantly. There is no ceremony. There is no champagne bottle. The clock has started. 0 hours. By 6:00 a.m., the sun tries to break through the grey soup of the Bay Area fog, but it only manages a pale, sickly light. To the casual observer, what is happening in Way 12 looks like madness. It looks like an ant colony kicking over its own hill. But to Liz, watching from the gantry, it is music. This is the Ballet of Steel, she promised the management. Under the old system, a ship grew like a plant, slowly, from the bottom up. You laid the keel, then you welded the vertical ribs, one by one, fighting gravity, balancing on ladders. Today, Way 12 is different. Look to the north end of the yard. A crane lifts an entire bow section. 3 stories tall, fully assembled, weighing as much as a locomotive. It swings through the air, casting a shadow over the workers. This section wasn't built here. It was built 2 weeks ago, lying flat on the ground in the pre-fab lot. The welders worked, downhand, letting gravity help the molten metal pool into the seams, making the welds stronger and 3 times faster than fighting to weld overhead. The crane operator, a man named Red Miller, who chews unlit cigars, feathers the controls. The massive bow section hovers over the keel. Easy. Easy. Liz whispers. The margin for error is less than 1/8 of an inch. If the section doesn't line up with the keel, they have to cut the steel and start over. That costs hours. They don't have hours. They have minutes. The wind gusts, catching the steel sail of the bow. It twists. Watch the line. A foreman screams. Men on the ground grab guide ropes, leaning back, digging their heels into the mud, wrestling the 60-ton monster back into alignment. It's man versus physics. Liz grips the railing. If that section swings too hard, it crushes the welding team waiting below. Hold it. She yells, though they can't hear her. Red Miller feathers the brake. The wind dies down for a heartbeat. The steel stabilizes. Drop. Or the bow slams into place against the keel. A perfect fit. The welders swarm. They are sewing the ship together, stitching giant quilts of armor plate. By noon on the first day, the hull is taking shape. It's growing so fast, it creates an optical illusion. You look away to light a cigarette, and when you look back, a new bulkhead has appeared, but speed has a price. You can see it in the faces of the graveyard shift as they tag out. These aren't just career steel workers. They are waitresses, teachers, and grandmothers. They are the Rosie the Riveters, wearing bandanas and heavy leathers, their skin grimy with soot. They are moving faster than human beings should move around heavy machinery. At 200 p.m., a crisis emerges in the engine room section. Liz is summoned down to the slipway floor. The mud sucks at her boots. The noise is deafening. Constant, rhythmic ratter, tat, tat of chipping guns that rattles your teeth. The foreman, a burly man named Kowalski, points a gloved hand at the midship section. The piping doesn't match. He yells over the din. The pre-fab intake valve is 3 inches off from the hull output. We can't connect the condenser. Liz crawls into the dark, cramped belly of the ship. It smells of fresh weld and sweat. She shines her flashlight. He's right. The pre-fabricated engine room section, built miles away, is slightly misaligned with the hull section built here. 3 inches. It might as well be 3 miles. We have to cut the pipe, Kowalski says. Strip it back, re-flange it. It'll take 6 hours. No, Liz says instantly. We don't have 6 hours. If we stop the engine install, we hold up the deck placement. If we hold up the deck, we miss the launch window. Liz, physics is physics, Kowalski snaps. We can't stretch steel. Kalais looks at the heavy condenser unit. It's bolted to the floor of the pre-fab section. Don't cut the pipe, she says, her mind rotating the blueprints in 3D. Move the floor. Kowalski stares at her. What? The floor plates aren't fully welded to the ribs yet. Liz explains rapidly, pointing the beam of light at the seams. They're just tack welded. Break the tacks on the floor plate. Jack the entire condenser unit, floor and all, 3 inches to the left. Then weld the floor back down. Jack the floor, with the equipment on it. Yes, it's faster to move the foundation than to rebuild the house. A Kowalski looks at the pipe, then at the floor. He grins, a flash of white teeth in a soot-blackened face. That's crazy. Get the jacks. Oh, they do it in 45 minutes. The supply line holds. By the time the sun sets on November 8th, the Robert E. Peary is no longer just a keel. The bottom shell is complete. The bulkheads are rising like canyon walls. 24 hours have passed. The frantic energy of the first day begins to curdle into something heavier, exhaustion. The adrenaline is fading, replaced by the crushing reality of the schedule. Liz is in the production trailer, forcing herself to eat a cold sandwich. She hasn't slept in 30 hours. Her hands have a slight tremor. The door opens, and Clay Bedford, the general manager, walks in. He looks fresh, shaven, wearing a suit. He looks out of place in the grime of the yard. The Navy is watching Liz, he says quietly. I just got off the phone with Admiral Vickery. He doesn't believe the reports. He's flying in. Let him come. Liz says, not looking up from the schedule. We're at 30% completion. That's the problem, Bedford says. 30% is easy. The hard part is the top. The superstructure, the deckhouse. You've got lifts scheduled for tomorrow that have never been attempted before. Not even by Kaiser. He leans in. You're planning to lift the entire deckhouse in one go? With the bridge installed, the wheel, the glass. It's ready, Liz says. It's 80 tons, Liz. If that crane cable snaps arms, or if that house swings into the hull. He trails off. He doesn't need to finish the sentence. It would wipe out the crew working below. It would be a massacre. It won't snap, Liz says, her voice hard. But under the table, her fist is clenched so tight her nails dig into her palm. Bedford says. Because the Admiral isn't coming to pin a medal on us. He's coming to shut us down if he thinks we're reckless. Bedford leaves. Liz is alone again with the hum of the electric lights and the distant roar of the yard. She walks to the window. Outside, under the glare of the floodlights, WWII glows like a blast furnace. The sparks cascade down the sides of the rising steel walls. It looks like a volcano erupting in reverse. She checks her stopwatch. Day 2 starts now, and the weather forecast is changing. The wind is picking up again, coming off the Pacific. A gale is forming. Liz looks at the schedule. 1400 hours, day 20 Deckhouse lift. 80 tons of steel, a gale force wind, and thousands of exhausted workers standing directly underneath it. She puts on her helmet. She isn't going to sleep tonight either. November 9th, 1942. 14:30 p.m. Richmond Shipyard, way number 12. The wind isn't just blowing anymore, it's shrieking. It whips off the white, capped bay, tearing at the tarps and turning the crane cables into singing violin strings. On the ground, a black Navy sedan pulls up to the edge of the slipway. The door opens and Admiral Howard Vickery steps out. He is the vice chairman of the Maritime Commission. He is the man who decides which shipyards get contracts and which ones get shut down. He clamps a hand over his hat and looks up. His face goes pale, hovering 60 feet above the deck of the unfinished WWII. Peary is the entire superstructure, the Deckhouse. It is a 4-story steel apartment building dangling by a thread. Inside that floating block of steel, the windows are already glazed. The radiators are installed. The captain's bunk is bolted to the floor. There is even a calendar on the wall. It weighs 84 tons. They're insane. Vickery mutters to his aide. Look at that sway. Oh, on the gantry, Liz Greeley isn't looking at the Admiral. She's looking at the sway too. The wind is catching the flat sides of the deckhouse, turning it into a massive, uncontrollable sail. It drifts 6 feet to the left, then swings back. If they lower it while it's swinging, the 84-ton mass will shear the bolts off the deck. It could tip. If it tips, it crashes through the hull, destroying the ship and killing the welding crews working inside the belly. Wind shear is 30 knots. The crane foreman yells into the radio. Liz, we have to abort. We can't control the swing. Liz grabs the railing. Aborting means lowering the house back to the ground, unhooking it. Waiting for the wind to die. That's a 10-hour delay. No abort. Liz barks. We don't wait for the wind. We fight it. She leans over the rail and signals to the ground crew. Get the tag lines! Everyone! I want every spare hand on those ropes. This is the brute force variable. Down in the mud, hundreds of workers drop their tools. Welders, riveters, electricians. They swarm the dangling guide ropes, trailing from the floating house. It looks like the scene from Gulliver's Travels. A swarm of tiny humans trying to restrain a giant. Hev! A foreman bellows. 300 people dig their heels into the sludge. The ropes go taut. The massive steel house groans. The wind gusts, fighting them. The workers slide forward in the mud. Hold it! Liz screams. It is a tug of war between nature and desperate patriotism. Admiral Vickery watches, mouth slightly open. He has seen ships built in Norfolk, in Brooklyn, in Scotland. He has never seen a mob of 300 civilians physically wrestle a ship's bridge out of the sky. Steady, Liz whispers. Her knuckles are white. The swinging stops. The sheer mass of bodies acts as a dampener. The house hovers, dead center over the hull. Drop it. Now. 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 Red Miller. The crane operator releases the brake. The house falls fast, too fast for comfort. It slams onto the deck markings. Crunch. The sound is sickeningly loud. Dust and rust explode outward from the impact point. The ship shudders violently in the water. Silence. Then, a welder waves a thumb up from the deck. It's seated. A roar goes up from the crowd. A mix of cheering and hysterical relief. The welders instantly dive in, tacking the house to the deck before the crane even unhooks. Admiral Vickery walks up the ramp to where Liz is standing. He looks at the ship, then at her. He doesn't smile. "That was reckless, Miss Greeley," he says, his voice flat. "That was calculated, Admiral," she replies, though her legs are trembling. "We're 42 hours in. The superstructure is set." "You're building a shell," Vickery counters. "It looks like a ship, but does it work? I'm hearing reports that you're painting over wet steel. I'm hearing the piping isn't pressure tested." "It will be tested," Liz says. "It better be," Vickery warns. "Because if this ship breaks in half in the Atlantic 'cause you missed a weld in your hurry, the blood is on your hands. Speed is fine, but buoyancy is non-negotiable." He turns and walks away. The victory of the lift evaporates. The fear returns. November 10th, Day 3. The hallucinations begin. The yard never sleeps. The floodlights burn all night. The noise never stops. By the third day, the human element begins to fray. The workers are running on caffeine, nicotine, and patriotism, but biology is catching up. Accidents spike. A rigger crushes his hand in a winch. A painter falls off a scaffold, luckily into a pile of sand, but he doesn't get up. He just falls asleep right there. Liz is in the hull, inspecting the propeller shaft tunnel. The air down here is toxic, thick with welding fumes and paint thinner. They are painting the engine room while the welders are still sealing the roof. The heat from the torches is baking the paint as it's applied. She blinks, and for a second, she sees the propeller shaft turn into a giant snake. She shakes her head violently. "Wake up, Liz!" It's Clay Bedford. He's clambering down the ladder. He looks frantic. "We have a problem with the stern," he says. "The rudder post. The casting is rough. The garring won't slide in." Grind it down," Liz says, rubbing her eyes. "We tried. It's too much material. We need to machine it. We can't take it back to the shop." "I know," Bedford says. "But if we don't fix it, we can't hang the rudder. If we can't hang the rudder, we can't launch tomorrow." Liz stares at the massive steel casting. It's the pivot point for steering the ship. It's solid steel. "Bring the machine shop here," she says. "What?" "Get the portable boring bar," she orders. "Bolt it directly to the ship's hull. We machine the stern post in place while the electricians are wiring the steering gear around us." "That's dangerous," Bedford says. "Sparks near the fresh paint." "Do it," she snaps. "Post fire watches with CO2 extinguishers every 5 feet. But we are not stopping." The frantic pace ramps up to a fever pitch. It is no longer construction, it is a brawl. They are fighting the ship into existence. As night falls on day 3, the Robert E. Peary is 90% complete. The masts are up. The guns are being mounted. The lifeboats are being hung. But a new sound begins to ripple through the yard. Not the bang of hammers, but a low, ominous groaning. Liz freezes. She knows that sound. It's coming from the slipway itself. The wooden blocks supporting the 7,000-ton ship are compressing. The mud under the slipway is shifting under the sudden, immense weight accumulation. Usually, a ship gains weight over months. The ground adjusts slowly, but they have dumped 7,000 tons onto the mud in 70 hours.
The way is settling!
Someone screams from under the hull. Liz runs to the edge. The ship is listing slightly to the starboard side. The ground is giving way. If the ship shifts too much before the launch, it will jam on the ways. It won't slide into the water. It will be a 7,000-ton beached whale stuck forever on the concrete, a monument to their failure. They have to get it off the land now, but it's not Thursday yet. It's Wednesday night. The ceremony isn't ready. The tide isn't right. Liz looks at the listing ship. She looks at the terrified crew. We can't wait for the tide, she whispers. November 12, 1942, 10:00 a.m., Richmond Shipyard, way number 12. The ship is groaning. It is a low, guttural sound, like a sleeping animal breathing heavily, underneath the hull, in the perpetual twilight between the steel belly and the muddy ground. A team of men is performing the most dangerous job in the world. They are the launch crew. They are crawling on their stomachs, smashing wedges into place with sledgehammers, trying to transfer the weight of the 7,000-ton ship from the stationary keel blocks to the ways. The greased rails that will slide it into the ocean. Liz Greeley is down there with them. The air is thick with the smell of hot paraffin wax and beef tallow. The crisis of the settling ground was averted, barely. They shored up the sagging timbers at 3:00 a.m., reinforcing the slipway with emergency concrete piers. But the structure is compromised. The WWII. Peary cannot sit here another day. Gravity is trying to pull it into the mud, not the water. Get the wax down, Liz orders. If the grease is too cold, she sticks. If she sticks, she breaks her back. The men are pouring buckets of hot grease onto the wooden rails. It has to be perfect. If there is too much friction, the ship won't move when the triggers are pulled. If there is too little, the ship might slide prematurely, crushing everyone beneath it before the water is ready to catch it. Above them, the sun has broken through. A crowd is gathering. Not just shipyard workers this time. The press is here. Newsreel cameras are set up on the gantries. The Navy brass, including a skeptical Admiral Vickery, are standing on the reviewing stand. They have come to see a magic trick, or a disaster. 4 days ago, this was empty air. Now, a massive grey freighter towers over the yard, flags snapping in the breeze. Paint is still wet on the hull. In fact, painters are still hanging off the sides, slapping the final coat of grey on the rivets as the launch ceremony begins. Liz climbs out from under the hull. She is covered in grease and mud. She wipes her hands on a rag and walks to the release station at the bow of the ship. It is day 4. Specifically, it has been 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes since the keel touched the blocks. The loudspeakers crackle. The national anthem begins to play. Liz doesn't hear the music. She is watching the triggers, the mechanical latches holding the ship back from gravity's embrace. There are 2 steel levers. When they drop, the only thing holding the ship will be momentum. Clay Bedford stands beside her. He looks at his watch, then at Liz. "You ready?" he asks. "The ship is ready." Liz corrects him. The question is, did we remember the drain plugs? It's an old shipyard joke. Ships sinking because someone forgot the bottom plugs. But nobody laughs. The tension is too high. The sponsor, Mrs. Jim Gerard, steps up to the bow with a bottle of champagne wrapped in a mesh bag. I christen thee. Robert E. Peary. Smash. The glass shatters against the steel. The champagne foams down the wet paint. Release triggers! The launch master screams. The sound is like a cannon shot. CLACK. For a second, nothing happens. The ship sits there, immense and stubborn. The crowd holds its breath. Did the grease freeze? Is it stuck? Then, a moan echoes through the steel. The ship shudders. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the grey wall begins to move backward. Creak, groan, diving. Then, speed. Gravity takes hold. The friction on the wooden rails is so intense that smoke begins to billow out from under the hull. The smell of burning beef tallow fills the air. The ship is literally burning its way into the water. It picks up speed. 10 knots. 15 knots. Liz runs to the edge of the slipway. This is the moment of truth. When the stern hits the water, the buoyancy will lift the back of the ship while the bow is still on the rails. The ship will pivot. If the hull welds are weak, if they rush too much, if the steel is cold, the ship will snap in half right there on the ramp. The stern hits the bay. A massive wave, 20 feet high, explodes outward, soaking the camera crews. The ship groans one last time as the water takes the weight. It bobs. It rolls slightly to the left. Then rights itself. It floats. It sits high and proud in the water, the ugly duckling, transformed into a lifeline for the world. The whistle on the Robert E. Peary blasts. A deep, triumphant roar that echoes off the Berkeley hills. The crowd erupts. Hats are thrown in the air. Men are hugging each other. The Rosies are weeping. Liz doesn't cheer. She drops her head, her shoulders sagging as the adrenaline finally leaves her body. She looks at the stopwatch in her hand. 4 days. 15 hours. 29 minutes. The previous record was 10 days. The standard was 230. They haven't just broken the record, they have shattered the concept of what is possible. Admiral Vickery walks up to Liz. The skepticism is gone from his face, replaced by a look of sheer, terrifying realization. He realizes that if America can do this, if a civilian mechanic can turn a shipyard into a Xerox machine for battleships, then the Axis powers have already lost. They just don't know it yet. Miss Greeley. The Admiral says, extending his hand. I'll tell the President. Don't tell him. Liz says, looking out at the ship, where tugboats are already nudging it toward the outfitting dock. Just send us more steel. We have another one to start. She turns back to the empty slipway. The keel blocks for the next ship are already being laid out. The cranes are already moving. Epilogue, the math of victory. The Robert E. Peary sailed 2 days later. She carried supplies to the Pacific, surviving the war. But the ship itself wasn't the weapon. The process was the weapon. Because of Liz Greeley and engineers like her, the Richmond system was copied across the United States. By 1944, America was launching 3 Liberty ships every single day. For every ship a German U-boat sank, American shipyards launched 3 new ones. It was a mathematical avalanche that buried the Third Reich. Hitler could fight soldiers, he could fight tanks. But he couldn't fight a supply line that regenerated faster than he could destroy it. Liz Greeley didn't carry a rifle. She didn't fly a bomber. She stood in the rain with a stopwatch and a pencil, and she reorganized the chaos of war into a conveyor belt of victory. She proved that while soldiers win battles, logistics win wars. And it all started with a 4-day miracle in the mud of California.